Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Vando mui savdhana mate Vando mui savdhana mate Jahar prasade bhai e bhavatariya jai Jahar prasade bhai e bhavatariya jai Krishna prapti hoi jaha hoi te Krishna prapti hoi jaha hoi te Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite Te Kariya Ikya Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite Te Kariya Ikya Arnaka Riha Mane Asha Arnaka Riha Mane Asha Shri Guru Charane Rati Eishe Uttama Gati Shri Guru Charane Rati Eishai Uttama Gati Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha Chakhudan dilo je janme janme Prabhu she Chakhudan dilo je janme janme Prabhu she Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashita Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashita Prema Bhakti Jaha Haite Avidya Vinash Jate Prema Bhakti Jaha Haite Avidya Vinash Jate Vede Gai Jahara Charita Vede Gai Jahara Charita Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adhamajanara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adhamajanara Bandhu Lokanath Lokeda Jivana Lokanath Lokeda Jivana Aha Prabhu Kara Daya Deha More Pada Chaya Aha Prabhu Kara Daya Deha More Pada Chaya Ha Prabhu Kara Daya Deha More Pada Chaya Ebe Jash Khushuk Tribhuvana Duapade Laila Sharan Aha Prabhu Kara Daya Deha More Pada Chaya Aha Prabhu Kara Daya Deha More Pada Chaya Prabhupada Patit Pavana Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Gurudev, 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 Gurudev. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Gurudev. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna. The lotus feet of the spiritual master are the abode of pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great care and attention. My dear brother, my dear mind, it is through the grace of our spiritual master that we can cross over this material existence and attain Krishna. Make the teachings emanating from the lotus mouth of our spiritual master one with your heart, and do not desire anything else. Attachment to his lotus feet is the best means of spiritual advancement. By his mercy, all desires for spiritual perfection are fulfilled. He who has given us this gift of transcendental vision is my Lord birth after birth. By his mercy, divine knowledge is revealed within the heart, bestowing prema bhakti and destroying ignorance. Vedic scriptures sing of his character. O spiritual master, ocean of mercy and friend of the fallen souls, you are the teacher of everyone and the life of all people. O master, be merciful unto me and give me the shade of your lotus feet. May your glories now be proclaimed throughout the three worlds. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. It's still a little noisy over there. I don't know what they're doing. Hard to concentrate. So thank you everyone for coming. Today we're going to finish with our discussion on this great song by Narottam Das Thakur, Guru Vandana. And we only have really one verse left, really only half of a verse left, because Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur doesn't comment beyond this Chakudan dilo je janme janme prohushe dibhyogan hriday prakashita. Other than to mention something, he comments on Vede Gai Jahara Charito. That also he says. But the last verse he doesn't say anything about. We'll try to fill it up. So we'll begin with Mangalacharana as always. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. This is in this edition, what I'm using, it is text number 5 of Prema Bhakti Chandrika. So we explained yesterday, briefly only, we were offering obeisances unto the spiritual master who appears in 2 ways. Anybody remember what 2 ways does the spiritual master appear in? Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru. And that's in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila chapter 1, text number 35. Mantra Guru Ara Jata Shikha Guru Gana Tahara Charana Age Kariya Bandhan. I first offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my initiating spiritual master and all my instructing spiritual masters. So with that as Mangalacharana, we'll continue. Chakhudan dilo jay janme janme prabhu she dibhigyan hriday prakashit. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur here says regarding, it's not one thing, it's another. Regarding Chakhudan ityadi, sangsararnava taranak purvakam charma chakshuramochayatva paratatva lokana yogya divya chakshurdena dattam. That means we're talking about that person by whom we have been given transcendental eyes that are capable of observing the supreme truths. Having been freed from our earthly eyes, physical eyes, and this gift that we've been given is described as sangsararana tarana purvakam. We discussed these 2 things yesterday. Tarana and parana. Yeah. So these 2 things are going on. You can't really embrace with your full capacity the pure devotional service of the Lord in the spiritual world, that is, in Krishna's Leela, until you've been freed from all anarthas. So that has to happen first, and that's called tarana. So samsara, arnava, this ocean is material existence, is like an ocean. Ocean. We'll talk more about oceans later on, but we often hear of the ocean of material existence. What comprises that ocean of material existence? Srila Prabhupada writes in one of his 4th canto purports, the ocean of material existence is made up of all the tears of all the conditioned souls who are suffering in this world. They're all crying. We're all crying. You've all cried before. And that's what fills up this ocean of material existence. And the eyes that we've been given by our spiritual master are sangsararnava tarana purvakam. They have the ability to carry us beyond this mess. And paratattva alokana yogya divya chakshuhu. They're transcendental eyes that are worthy of observing spiritual phenomenon, transcendental phenomenon. So that's his gift. In other words, divya gyan. So, I'm just going to translate here. He says, in the lines beginning Chakhudan Diloje, he means that one who, freeing us from bodily eyes by delivering us from the ocean of material life, confers upon us divine eyes capable of observing the transcendent supreme truth. Here, Divya Gyan and so on refer to that by which transcendental knowledge is illuminated within the heart in the form of Krishna Diksha, instructions, and so forth. This should be supplied. The line beginning Vedegai means his activities are what are to be sung in the Vedas. His activities are what is sung in the Vedas, as described in the essence of all Vedanta, which is Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he quotes 11th canto, chapter 17, text 27, very famous verse, Acharyam mam vijaniyan, ityadi. As well as Shrutis, such as Acharyavan Purusho Veda, which is Chandogya Upanishad, 6.14.2, and Acharya Devo Bhava, which is Taittiriya 1.11.12, and so on. He only gives 3 references, but this is what we're talking about. Okay. So regarding Chakudan, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur first notes that we have been given transcendental vision. As such, we're comparable to Arjuna, right? What happened in Bhagavad-Gita chapter 11? Anybody know? Nobody's ever read Bhagavad-Gita? Huh? What happened in chapter 11? Krishna revealed his universal form to Arjuna, but Arjuna didn't have proper eyes to see it, Krishna said. So, Divyam dadami te chakshu pashyame yogam aishwaram. This is verse 8 of that chapter. I'm giving you transcendental eyes. Now see my mystic opulence. Without such mercy, what is the likelihood that any of us would ever even begin to understand what we now know about Krishna by the divine grace of Krishna in the form of Srila Prabhupada? What is the chance? Zilch. Nothing. No chance. That is a fact. Prabhupada said about Indians in particular, no offense, he said, Indians are very fortunate because from the very beginning of their lives, they know everything about Krishna. But they're unfortunate because from the very beginning of their lives, they know everything wrong about Krishna. And we in the West, when we were born, we knew nothing about Krishna at all, right or wrong. We did absolutely nothing. Sometimes that's helpful, actually. I was talking to a godbrother who actually comes from an Iyengar family, supposed to be very Pakka Brahmins, Sri Vaishnavas. But he said that his parents were not really so orthodox. They were professional lawyers and whatever, doctors and whatever people do, and engineers. So he didn't really get the kind of training, but for that reason, he was fortunate enough because whatever Prabhupada told him, he could immediately accept it. Otherwise, there's some hesitance. If you think you know something, it's a problem. And this is really rampant disease here in South Asia. We know. Bilkul, we know everything. We don't need to. This old-fashioned bhajan nonsense. We already know this. You don't know it. But it's hard to convince people of that. Anyway, so what somebody who can give this kind of benediction, that person deserves our gratitude. Gratitude. And fidelity. What does fidelity mean? Loyalty. And gratitude means to appreciate something that has been done for you. Kritagnya, we say in Sanskrit. Kritagnyata. The ability to appreciate something that someone has done. Krita, for you. All right, now in Srimad Bhagavatam, we find an example of this kind of gratitude in Canto 11, Chapter 29, Text 6, but it's also quoted in this first chapter of the Adi Lila. Since we're talking about the spiritual master, it's quite relevant. Naivo payantya pachetam kavayastavesh brahmayushapi kritamruddha mudaha smarantaha yontarbahistanu ashubham vidhunvan acharya chaitya vapusha swagatim vyanakti. O my Lord, transcendental poets and experts in spiritual science could not fully express their indebtedness to you, even if they were endowed with a prolonged lifetime of Brahma. For you appear in 2 features, externally as the Acharya and internally as the Supersoul, in order to deliver the embodied living being by directing him how to come to you. I said earlier that most of us could never have figured out what we now know by Srila Prabhupada's grace about Krishna. On our own, practically impossible. Even though Paramatma is within our hearts, if we don't want to hear what he has to say, then he's not going to scream at us. He's not going to keep talking to us. You want to be left alone, he'll leave you alone. That's what Paramatma does. But as soon as we display any inclination to return to devotional service, then he becomes very keenly excited and very proactive and very busily engages his entire resources, which are considerable, in trying to bring us back home, back to Godhead. He sends the Bhagavad-Gita, he sends other shastras, he sends the devotees, we hear the kirtan, we see the deity in the temple and become inspired. So many different ways the Lord has reached out to us. Most of the time, we're so dense and self-absorbed, we don't even notice everything that he's doing for us. So for us to have this kind of kritagnyata, it's a bit of a challenge in the beginning when we're so covered over by highly concentrated selfishness. Gani bhuta. How do you say selfishness? Atma. There's a word for it just now, I forget. Huh? What do you say? Selfish in Hindi. Svarthi. Yeah, svartha. Svarthata, you can svarthatva, something like that. Okay, so Lord comes, at least this verse mentions, he comes externally as the Acharya and internally as the Super Soul. We don't listen to Super Soul. He doesn't push too hard, so the Acharya is a little bit more merciful. Because Acharya will go out of his way, take some trouble, and really push on us. All right, if one has made such a Guru's instructions one with his heart, then what began in the beginning as theoretical understanding that this is the Uttamagati, now, by the time we hear this verse, it has been practically realized as Swagatim. Swagati. You catch my drift? The last line of the verse, what did it say? Acharya Chaitya Vapusha, in the form of both the Acharya and Paramatma, Swagatim Vyanaktim. He reveals to us our own aim in life. In the beginning, it's not our aim in life. We can only hear about it as we heard yesterday. Eishe Uttamagati. And okay, that's a dogma. I'm supposed to have this as my aim in life. But actually, if you practice Krishna consciousness, and in particular, if you really weld the instructions of the spiritual master into your heart, that's what it means. Chitte te koriya aikya, or as we heard yesterday, what was it? Hridikari mahashakya. Very, very strongly taking it to heart. If we're prepared to do that, then Swanakti, Swagatim Vyanakti. He manifests to us what is our own self-interest, real self-interest. What is our own goal? That becomes realized in our heart. Swagati Hogaya. So, this is what we're talking about here. This is why Krishnadas Kaviraj in the first canto is quoting this verse from 11th canto. On this Bhagavatam verse, Sridhar Swami's sub-commentator Vamshidhara glosses the word Swagatim as follows. What does he say? Listen. Swagatim premavat parshadatva lakshanam gatim. That he vyanakti, that he reveals to us. In other words, our real goal is to become an associate, to reach our highest ideal in the form of, or symptom characterized by, being an associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and being full of love for Him. This is what we want. Does it say we have to go back to Godhead? Not necessarily. Not necessarily, although many do. It's fine if that's what the Lord wants. But premavat parshadatva lakshanam gatim. This is swagatim. When we, through Krishna consciousness, through the process of hearing and chanting, and mainly by surrendering, actually, it's not just an academic affair, it's not just a discipline of yoga or something like others we see doing, Ashtanga yoga and whatnot. It's actually a question of surrendering. And when we surrender to the Lord, then He reveals everything to us, and we see that actually my real swagati is this thing only, to become premavat parshada, premavan parshada, to be an associate of the Lord who loves Him very, very much. So in this world that can happen, in the next world that can also happen, in Vaikuntha it can happen, anywhere. All right, so therefore, Vamshidhara says, Swagatim premavat parshatatva lakshanam gatim vyanakti. One's own aim. Swagatim means the aim of being a personal associate of the Lord, possessing pure love of God. So Narottam Das Thakur, he expresses his profound gratitude. I mean, the same profound gratitude that we all should have, any genuine disciple should realize. Janme Janme Prabhu Shei. Chakhudan Dilo Jay. Janme Janme Prabhu Shei. That person who has given this gift to me, I have to serve him birth after birth after birth. He is my Lord and Master, birth after birth. Now, in modern society, and even here in India, I'm sorry to say, due to the social degradation that naturally follows any time too many people deliberately neglect their varnashram responsibility, there's going to be social degradations. And as a result of that ignorance, we hardly even know what it means to be a servant now, or to have a master. We don't know what it means to have a master because we're socialized by people who teach us to be the master instead of serve the master. This is a real problem. It makes Krishna consciousness difficult. The society is not conducive to our spiritual game, swagatim. So we have to do something about that. We don't know what it means to have a master. We don't know what it means to be a servant. Someone has to actually practice all these social roles, or else they're just eventually going to come to mean nothing to anyone. That's a problem. Just as we earlier heard in the last class, Srila Prabhupada was explaining in Srimad Bhagavatam 4th Canto, Chapter 28, about King Malayadhwaja and his faithful wife, who became a widow, and she underwent the sati ritual. So what did Prabhupada do in that context? Do anybody remember? What did... Yes. Yes. Just as a chaste wife will voluntarily enter fire and separation from her husband, sati. So Prabhupada said, a disciple who cannot fulfill the instructions of his spiritual master after the spiritual master departs, he should rather die than continue to live in that unfortunate situation. So, just as we heard that, we should appreciate that the Shudras in human society, they're practically everybody else's guru. How is that possible? We say the Brahmins and the sannyasis are the gurus of society. I'm saying now that the Shudras are the gurus of society. Kaise? How is it possible? Think about it. They teach us how to become a servant. And where is Krishna consciousness without being a servant? Mukunda Dutta Dasoham, right? This is the name we all take with dasa or dasi. You have to learn how to be servants. And servants are so humble. They're becoming less and less humble every day. Anyone who has a maid, you know. They come whenever they want. They may not come. They steal things, they argue sometimes, talk back sometimes also. This is, this is what we're talking about. The whole conception has been perverted and lost. But a real servant is characterized by which really prominent quality? Loyalty is there, but what else? Huh? Submissive? Yeah, we're getting really warm. Think about Shikshastaka. Third verse. Humility. A real servant has to be very humble. That is what it means. What does a fancy Sanskrit word we have for the servant? Kinkara. Kinkara. What does it mean, kinkara? Kim karishyama. Bhobavan, kim karishyama. What shall I do? This is a servant. So when this attitude becomes lost in society, then how in the world are we going to approach Krishna consciousness without a great deal of baggage to unravel first? It's hardly possible. So it's a big problem. So the servants best know dasya bhava. Real servant. They best know what is dasya bhava, and there can be no bhakti without dasya bhava. That's not in question, I think. Even if you're, just like here we are in Vrindavan, everyone is concerned about becoming a gopi, entering manjari bhava and all these things. But even if you're interested only in madhurya rasa, still you have to know what it means to be a servant. Otherwise, how can there ever be radha dasyam? You have to have it. There is no raganuga bhakti without varnashram dharma in this way. Maybe that's why Srila Prabhupada told us that this is the remaining 50% of his mission. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. Or maybe it's because he saw that his own disciples were struggling to remain civilized human beings, because that also happens. But even Madhurya Rasa is permeated by Radha Dasyam. So adherence to traditional Varnashrama conventions or norms is every bit as essential to Raganuga Bhakti as it is to any effort to preach or to perform Sankirtan. Now, how is that? That's another very strong statement. What's the correlation? I was in Los Angeles. I won't mention any names, but one sannyasi was giving the Srimad Bhagavatam class. The chapter and the passage and the verse and the purport were all about the topic of Varnashram Dharma. The class, on the other hand, was exclusively about book distribution, did not mention Varnashram Dharma even, what to speak of explain it. So at the end of the class, I didn't really want to raise my hand, and so I didn't. But the biggest book distributor in the western half of the United States at that time raised his hand with a question. He said, Maharaj, I'm distributing these books every day for the last 30 or 40 years. And I'm one of the biggest, book distributors in the country. And I meet people who tell me, that they're so much impressed with these teachings and they follow in their own way at home. And, I asked them, frankly, that, why don't you come and join us? Because, it sounds like we have a lot in common. And they say, well, yeah, the problem is that we see that there's a difference between what these books say and the way that you people live. Wow. What are you going to do with that kind of thing? If you do not practice everything that emanates from the lotus mouth of the spiritual master, as we discussed yesterday, if you don't do that, then you open yourself up to charges of kaitava, which we began the parasan we were discussing. Kaitava, cheating, hypocrisy. So humility means that you accept yourself as a servant. Whatever the spiritual master orders, you do it with folded hands. Samit pani srotriyam brahmanishtam. This is the reference now. Samit pani. You have either a straw between your teeth, as Rup Sanatan did, or you have hands holding what? Samit pani. What's in your hand? Yeah, wood. Arani, yeah, for lighting the sacrificial fires, because in that old days, that was what the gurus did. They lived in ashrams in the forest, simple living, high thinking. They weren't living in Bandra or, what is that? Sainik Farms in Delhi, or, so many places. Bangalore, oh my God, Bangalore. I call it Los Angeles. So anyway, this Varnashram is very essential even to preaching. This is the point. Because you have to set the example. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, even before you begin to preach, you have to act properly. Otherwise, people are going to look back, well, look, this is what you did in 19, whatever it is. you have to try to be an example. Otherwise, there's no preaching. And the worst thing you can do, according to Chanakya Pandit, with your Shastric knowledge, the very worst thing you can do is fail to apply it to your practical life. He says it becomes like poison. Did you know this? I forget the shloka just now, but he actually says this. Shastra that you leave neglected and do not apply personally to your life, that is poison. Because all it does is increase your pride. And you'd mislead others with all of your own misconceptions. So it's very, very essential for preaching. And even if you're a bhajananandi, because there are two types, right? You have the Goshthianandis, they're the preaching devotees. And you have the Bhajananandis, they're just interested in doing their own personal bhajan. But in either case, you have to have Varnashram Dharma, otherwise you cannot succeed. At the very least, you have to appreciate the great contribution made to human society by the Shudras, lower classes, who show us how to be servants. So this is an important point. Now, Narottam Das Thakur, because we're talking about our birth after birth, gratitude and fidelity and service to the spiritual master out of, genuine appreciation for the great gift that we've been given. That's the context in which we're saying all these things. Narottam Das Thakur's assertion that our spiritual master is our Lord, birth after birth, suggests not only his tremendous gratitude, but moreover, that a pure devotee doesn't even care to be liberated. And we talked about that yesterday. When we heard Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad, also in his comments about Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, what did he say? Remember? I may be liberated, I may not be liberated. It just doesn't matter. My only concern is Guru Seva, Guru Nishtha. So it's kind of hinted here by Narottam Das Thakur, Janme Janme Prabhu Shei. Certainly, it implies that he's planning on doing this seva in his next life as well, wherever that may be. So, tremendous gratitude and detachment from karma and gyan. Both things are there. Now, sometimes Srila Prabhupada, when he quoted these lines, sometimes I've also heard him say, Chakhudan dilo jay, janme janme pitashe. Anybody ever heard this? Pitashe, father. For example, during a morning walk in Mayapur on March 2nd, 1974, Srila Prabhupada said, quote, Narottam Das Thakur sings that one who has opened my eyes, my spiritual master, he's my father, life after life, end quote. So how can he say, okay, now you go away. Now I found a better guru. You please, dismiss me and I'll go find somebody better. No, that's not the right attitude. That's Mayavad philosophy. The point is that one can never change one's father, isn't it? After birth, that's it. That is the fact. You can't really change that. So in the same way, someone who has given you second birth, you cannot change that. You cannot change that. Sometimes people do this. They get confused. They want to find a guru. Especially, and the more urban people get and the more modern people get, it seems that they're just so restless and passionate. Every 6 months, they've got a new email, a new phone number, a new job, a new address, a new spouse, a new guru, and a new philosophy. So, this is the problem. But Chakhudan dilo je janme janme pitashe, he says. That's one thing. Now, Mayavadis, they have this misconception that once they think that they've become liberated, this is called vimuktamani, vimuktaman. When they become proud, thinking themselves liberated, then what do they do with the guru? They dismiss. Like a servant, you send home the servant. So, this is not the right attitude. Pure devotees feel so indebted that they are prepared to serve life after life out of deep gratitude and love for their spiritual master. Now, a final thing is that we hear from Taittiriya Upanishad, Matra Devo Bhava, Pitra Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, ityadi. So Pitra Devo Bhava, you have to respect your parents just as much as you respect your Acharya. Because they are your first gurus, you can say that. So that's another way. The point being that the Lord, the spiritual master, and one's father should all be of one mind. If they're qualified, they will be of one mind. Just like yesterday we had that question. What happens if one Shiksha Guru says X and another Shiksha Guru says Y? It means somebody's wrong. Sorry. That's just the way it is. There cannot be two absolute truths. There has to be only one. It's like we said, left foot, right foot. It was a spiritual master, but they belong to the same person. They're not different. Left foot and right foot are trying to do different things. What's going to happen? It doesn't work. So, all right. So, sabhi ek se hona chahiye. What is that? Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavad-Gita. And Narottam Das Thakur elsewhere also says. They're all the same. Same thing. Nothing different. All right, so that's what we can say about Chakhudan Diloje Janme Janme Prabhushe, etc. Now, in connection with Dibya Gyan Hriday Prakashito, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur had commented, well, he quoted, he said, Krishna Dikshadi Shikshana Rupam Divyam Gyanam Hriday Prakashitam. That means one's heart is illumined with transcendental knowledge in the form of initiation, instruction, and so on. So, to me, it seems obvious here that he's paraphrasing Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, which we actually quoted very briefly on the first day of this seminar. And so I'll quote it again in full. This is Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.98. Shri Krishna Dikshadi Shikshanam Yatha Tatreva Tatra Bhagavatan Dharman Shikshed Guruvatma Daivataha Amayayanuvrityayais Tushed Atmatmado Harihi. This is the 11th canto, quoting. Rupa Goswami in Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu is quoting from 11th canto, chapter 3, text 22, regarding acquiring knowledge after initiation. And that verse that he quotes means accepting the bona fide spiritual master as one's life and soul and worshipable deity. The disciple should learn from him the process of pure bhakti by sincere service. By that pure bhakti, the Lord, the Supreme Soul, will be satisfied and will give himself to that devotee. Now, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the Bhagavatam, which Rupa Goswami has just quoted, he gives his own purport there. Quote, the Guru is called Atma because he is as dear as the self is. Where do we find an example of this in Bhagavatam? Famous example. Disciple, Pakka disciple who, his Guru is more important than his own life, more important than his own self-preservation. We say self-preservation is the first law of nature. Everybody takes care of number one first. But who took care of his guru first? Recently we studied this in Bhagavatam class. Kuchela, what's his name? Sudama Vipra. When they were in Gurukul together, the guru sent them out to collect firewood, thinking, he's a, so Krishna Balaram sent them out thinking these are princes. I have to humble them out a little bit. Everybody knows Kshatriyas sometimes they need to be a little humbler, more humble, right? Because they have Ishvara Bhava. So, that's what he did. But then his wife talked to him and said, these boys are out there and now it's raining and what's going to happen to them? So the guru got concerned. He sent out all these other students, went out looking for them. Nobody could find them. Next day they came back and they had the firewood and they slept in the forest all night. They didn't want to, get the firewood wet, right? Just for their guru they did this. Other examples are also there elsewhere. But this is what he says. The guru is called Atma because he's as dear as the self is. One should learn Bhagavad Dharma Bhakti from the guru who is worthy of worship, like a deity, Daivataha, and is as dear as one's self. And how do you worship him? By sincere service. Amayaya anuvritya. That's what those words mean. The Lord, who is the real Atma and who gives himself to the worshippers, is pleased by these acts of bhakti. So that's why he quotes this verse, Rupa Goswami, in regards to Krishna Diksha, Adi, and Shikshanam, taking initiation from a bona fide spiritual master and rendering service unto that spiritual master. This is the ideal that he's trying to raise in our consciousness. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada also explains initiation in his purport to Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila chapter 15, text 108. And he does so by quoting Srila Jiva Goswami's definition of Diksha, which is given in Bhakti Sandarbha number 283. Famous definition, it's throughout Prabhupada's books, you've all heard it before. Anybody can guess what I'm thinking? Which verse? I'll give you a hint. Divyam Jnanam. Yeah, Divyam Jnanam tato dadyat kuryat papasya sankshayam tasmad diksheti sa prokta deshikais tattva kovidaihi. So the teachers who are expert in the truth, they have declared what is Diksha? It is that by which one is conferred with transcendental knowledge and by which one's sins are destroyed. Diksha is a process by which one can awaken this transcendental knowledge and vanquish all reactions caused by sinful activity. That's why you have to take initiation. We were discussing in previous classes our ignorance, our anarthas, these things are all coming from or nourished by our sinful activities. Well, as long as the sinful activities are there, these ugly anarthas will also be there. But Diksha alone will remove the sinful reactions. Presumably, if you're solidly based in good character as a result of also following Purashcharana. Purashcharana for us means just following the basic program of Krishna consciousness for a period of time before initiation. Once you're solid in that practice, then you should not have any recidivistic tendencies. You should not fall down again. This is the ideal. So, it means to confer transcendental knowledge and to remove all sinful activities. A person expert in the study of the revealed scriptures knows this process as Diksha. Srila Prabhupada explained also this process of initiation, which happens to be the same as his own consistent practice throughout ISKCON history, from beginning to the end. He never wavered. He explained this process throughout his books, and one such example is found in CC Madhya Lila 24.330, wherein Prabhupada writes, quote, "A serious disciple must be alert when selecting a bona fide spiritual master." You remember yesterday, what did we say about this? Savadana. Bandho mui savadana mate. Be cautious, be careful, look out. So a serious disciple must be alert when selecting a bona fide spiritual master, not when reviewing a bona fide spiritual master. When selecting that spiritual master, that's when you have to be very critical, very keen, unsparing even, but not offensive. But you have to be very, very discriminatory at that stage. After initiation, not so at all. Then it becomes aparadha. So you have to be very alert when selecting a bona fide spiritual master. He must be sure that the spiritual master can deliver all the transcendental necessities. The spiritual master must observe also. The spiritual master must observe how inquisitive the disciple is and how eager he is to understand the transcendental subject matter. The spiritual master should study the disciple's inquisitiveness for no less than 6 months or a year. This was always Prabhupada's practice. Generally 6 months to a year. For receiving what he called first initiation. That's called Harinama. And spiritual master, not only is he testing the disciple should also be testing the spiritual master. Don't make that decision. Don't take that step if you're not absolutely certain that even after several decades, you're still going to feel the same way. Very, very important point. So then back to CC Madhya 15.108 in his purport, Srila Prabhupada adds to this. For 6 months, a candidate for initiation must first attend oddity and classes in the Shastras, practice the regulative principles, and associate with other devotees. When one is actually advanced in the Purashcharya Vidhi, Purashcharya, that means things that, practices that purify you and prepare you for taking initiation. In our process of Krishna consciousness, our process of ISKCON activity, and in Prabhupada's own practice as well, as we've been stating, all you have to do is just plug into the program. Just begin to attend the program, hear the Bhagavatam, take prasadam, associate with devotees, chant 16 rounds, follow the principles. That's really all you have to do. And when you're situated solidly in that behavior, that is considered to have, you're considered to have gone through the Purashcharya Vidhi. Then he is recommended by the local temple president for initiation. And please don't make this into a political thing. I see this all the time. Temple president has a different political view than you do, and so he won't write your letter because he doesn't want to empower his opposition or his competition, as the case may be. Anyway, South Asia is the most political place on the planet. But yeah, we don't want to contaminate this process with, mundane politics, which is all that is. It is not that anyone can be suddenly initiated without meeting the requirements. And Prabhupada continues, when one is further advanced by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra 16 rounds daily, following the regulative principles, and attending classes, he receives the sacred thread, Brahminical recognition, after the second 6 months. I mean, usually it's more like a year for second initiation. First initiation you can request. Second initiation you cannot request. It's awarded. At least that was the standard. I don't know what they do now. Let's hope that all these guru-disciple courses are teaching people these things. But therefore, in the Adi Lila, chapter 1, text 47, Prabhupada also writes in another purport, quote, the Acharya, in the true sense of the term, is one who is authorized to deliver Krishna. He enriches the disciple with full spiritual knowledge and thus awakens him to the activities of devotional service. Does that sound familiar? It sounds exactly like the definition that we just read from Bhakti-Rasamrita Sindhu. Exactly the same. In preparing my notes for this class explaining this song, I've seen that all of our acharyas, they're all quoting the same references to make the same points. It's very consistent. Okay. Then Prabhupada's purport continues, there is no difference between the shelter-giving Supreme Lord and the initiating and instructing spiritual masters. If one foolishly discriminates between them, he commits an offense in the discharge of devotional service. Why? Because we know from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, Yasya deve parabhaktir yatha deve tatha gurau. Bus. Whatever faith you place in the Supreme Lord, same faith you have to have in the spiritual master. You cannot have one without the other. That's called Ardhakukuti Nyaya. You want the half of the chicken that lays the eggs, but you don't want the half of the chicken that you have to feed. So, yeah, we don't want to commit that offense. And then finally, he says in Adi Lila, chapter 1, text 35, purport, a devotee must have only one initiating spiritual master because in the scriptures, acceptance of more than one is always forbidden. Did you hear what I just said? Everybody got that? I'm going to say it again. A devotee must have only one initiating spiritual master because in the scriptures, acceptance of more than one is always forbidden. That means that doesn't sound like reinitiation is necessary. That's how I understand it. There is no limit, however, to the number of instructing spiritual masters one may accept. One may accept, not that you have to. Ideally, the thing is that the one person should be fulfilling all of your needs. That's a bona fide guru in the strict sense of the term, as Prabhupada described. But if somehow or other, if that doesn't work out, then we may have other Shiksha Gurus. But the Shiksha Guru who's giving instruction, he has to be in sync with the Diksha Guru who gave the initiation. He can't be teaching a different philosophy or belong to a different political party, or then it causes problems. So that's why the best thing is to have one spiritual master who performs both functions. As I said, left foot, right foot. It belongs to the same person. Okay. Generally, a spiritual master who constantly instructs the disciple in spiritual science becomes his initiating spiritual master later on. This is my point, which is Prabhupada's point. End quote. So, this is how a bona fide spiritual master illuminates one's heart with transcendental knowledge, through Diksha and through Shiksha, as described in Srila Prabhupada's own words from his books. This is another point that we want to privilege the words in Prabhupada's books over those in his letters and, maybe conversations and other sources of information, even authoritative instructions that Prabhupada gave. Why is that? It's discussed in Madhya Lila chapter 20, text number 352, if I'm not mistaken. Prabhupada has a very brilliant purport there, wherein he's talking about how one can assess who is a bona fide incarnation or not. It's always on the basis of Shastra. And he quotes Vyasadev's Brahma Sutra, Shastra Yonitvat. What does that mean? Shastra Yonitvat means the basis of all authority is the Shastra. Therein, Srila Prabhupada makes a very strong statement, but very important, essential instruction he gives. The real center of authority is actually the Shastra only. Because if a guru speaks something that is not in the Shastra, that he's not a guru. And if the sadhu speaks something that is not in the Shastra, he's not a sadhu. But you cannot say it the other way around. You can't say the Shastra is wrong because it doesn't sync with what the Guru says. You can't say that. Neither you can say because the Shastra says something other than what because the sadhu says something different than what the Shastra says, therefore Shastra is wrong. No. The real center of authority comes only from Shastra, Shastra Yonidvat. And we said yesterday, as Prabhupada has kind of updated this in English, books are the basis. Books are the basis. His books, that is to say. So we should always keep this in mind. And this is described by Srila Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada himself, through his books. I'm only quoting from his books here, you may have noticed. But all this is by way of explaining this one line that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives a lot of emphasis to. What is that one line? Dibyo Gyan Hriday Prakashita. He illumines transcendental wisdom within your heart. This is how he does it. Dikshadi Shikshanam Ityadi. So, moving on, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on this song doesn't really explain the lines Prema Bhakti Jaha Haite Abidya Binash Jate. He doesn't say anything about that. He just doesn't mention it. Just like yesterday we heard, he didn't really say anything about Jahara Prashade Bhai Bhavatarya Jai. By everything else that he's said here, and that we've discussed, I think it should be obvious by now. Your prema bhakti is only coming from one place, Jahara Prasade Bhai. Or, as it is here, prema bhakti jaha hoite. The prema bhakti comes from him. And avidya binasha jate. And that prema bhakti does not come about until the avidya is destroyed. So these things I think he takes in as clear. The main point is that the bona fide Guru's blessing affects both of these things. That's really the main point. Your ignorance will be destroyed. That's called taraka, and your prema bhakti will be assured. That's called paraka, as we discussed. All right. Now he also explains that when Narottam Das Thakur sings Vede Gai Jahara Charita, what does he mean? He implies the following references, and he gives 3 of them here. We've already heard this. First one, 11th canto, chapter 17, text number 27. Acharyam mam vijaniyan navamanyeta karhichit nabartya buddhya suyet sarvadeva mayo guruhu. One should know the Acharya as myself and never disrespect him in any way. One should not envy him, thinking him an ordinary man, for he is the representative of all the demigods. Actually, the Sanskrit is much more emphatic than that even. Sarvadeva mayo guruhu, what does it mean literally? He's made out of all the demigods. How is that possible? Think about it. Yes yasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana samasate. What is that verse? Sarvari gunais tatra samasate suraha. It's very clear in Bhagavatam 5th canto. All the demigods, along with their qualities, they come and they sit in the heart of a pure devotee. Normally, demigods, they only manifest in your life in the form of whatever opulence you have, in accordance with their duty to administer your karma. That's it. They don't have any particular affection for you. They're just on the clock. They have a job to perform. And so they come when you've got the karma for a particular opulence, and when that karma runs out, they go. This is it. But in the case of the devotee, when the demigods see the character of a devotee who's ahaituki bhakti, then they think, this is a really rare person. I should get this person's association myself. And so they come and they sit within his heart and they stay there. Samyak asana. Samyak asate means samasate. They come, they sit down, and they remain there. They're not just temporary manifestation of karma, the good qualities of a devotee, such as compassion, which we're about to discuss in a few minutes. So this is an important thing. Sarvadeva Mayoguruhu means actually he's made out of all these gods. They're all within him. This is the point. And therefore, Namardya Buddhya, don't think he's an ordinary man. We read that yesterday from 8th canto. And na asuyeta, you should not be envious. Na avamanyeta, you should not think anything less of him, that, oh, he's a New York Jew, or this one, he's a North Indian businessman, or whatever. You should not have these thoughts. Acharya mam vijaniyan. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary, he makes it a point, make sure we understand that when Krishna says the Acharya is myself, it's not taken in an absolute sense, literally. What it means instead is that we should understand it to mean that he is my most dear servant. He's like myself, as dear as myself. That's the point. That should be obvious to anyone who reads Prabhupada's books, because Prabhupada doesn't let you forget it. But it does have to be mentioned, unfortunately, because in this world, the influence of Mayavad is so pervasive and people are so mischievous, they may come to the wrong conclusion. Okay, so that's the first reference, and frankly, I have to say, if we were to fully explain that one verse, Acharya Mam Vijaniyan, that requires a whole separate seminar. That one verse alone. The commentary is vast by various acharyas and authorities. So I'm just going to quote the verse and leave it at that. Second reference he quotes. And what are we explaining here, by the way? Why is he quoting all these verses? It's to illustrate what? Vede Gai Jahara Charita. The Vedas glorify his character. These are the Vedic references that do so. Second one is this. Chandogya Upanishad 6.14.2. Tasya yatha abhinahanam pramuchya prabhuryad etam disham gandhara etam disham vrajeti sagrama gramam prichan pandito medhavi gandharaneva upasampadhyeta evam eva iha acharyavan purusho veda. Tasya tayat eva chidam yavan vimokshyeta sampatyeti. This is Uddalaka Aruni explaining to his son Shwetaketu. If, just as somebody may remove a person's blindfold and say, Gandhara is over there, go that direction. Where is Gandhara now? Afghanistan. We call it Kandahar. Totally fallen from Vedic culture now, unfortunately. Don't think it can't happen here, kids. It can. And to a large extent, it already has. As we said earlier, what do you have to do to prevent that? You have to act in accordance with what these books say. You have to actually do it. You have to apply the principles in these teachings in your own life. That is what creates a divine society. So someone may have been blindfolded, doesn't know where he is, but you take off his blindfold, you point to the northwest and say, that's where Kandahar is, go there. And he goes there. And on the way, maybe he'll also ask some intelligent people from the village, which way is Gandhar? And they'll all keep saying, yes, it's this direction. Unless you're in London. In London, I had the experience. You ask anybody directions, and they'll say, you just go up and straight away, you'll get it. But Prabhupada said for that reason, you have to ask directions from 5 people. And in India, they're so polite, nobody wants to give you any bad news. So even if they don't know the way, they'll still say, yes, they want to be helpful, right? So anyway, but the ideal is that, that people should be directing you to the proper place and proceeding from one village to another, asking this way and relying on information that people give, he finally reaches Gandhara. This is the point. Why is he saying all this? Because in the same way, a person who gets a bona fide guru, Acharyavan, Purusho Veda, that person knows. He knows what's happening because Acharya has told him. And he thinks, this is a mental quote here, there's a delay for me here only as long as I'm not free of this bodily conception of life. But when I am free, then I will arrive. Where will you arrive? Swagatim. Swagati. And what is that swagati we already discussed? Premavat parshadatva lakshanam gatim. Swagatim. Iti venakti. Okay. I will arrive. We should have this faith. This is why we say, Yasya Devi Parabhaktir Yatha Devi Tatha Guru Tasyaiti Katita Hirtaha Prakashante Mahatmanaha. We just went through a long discussion of how the Dibya Gyan Hride Prakashita. Now the Shveta Shruti mantra is also telling us Prakashante Mahatmanaha. Those Mahatmas are enlightened by this process, having strong faith in the lotus feet of the spiritual master, accompanied by this service attitude that we've been discussing, and willingness to follow the instructions. And then finally, his last evidence to show how Bedegai Jahara Charita is true. He says, quotes Taittiriya Upanishad 1.11.2, Deva Pitrikarya Bhyam Na Pramaditavyam Matridevo Bhava Pitridevo Bhava Acharya Devo Bhava Athiti Devo Bhava Yani Anadayani Karamani Tani Sevitavyani Noiterani Yani Asmakam Sucharitani Itani Ivayos Pashyami. This is Ivayo Pasyami, sorry. What does it mean? It means never deviate from Aryan gods and ancestors. Never deviate from the Aryan gods and ancestors. Treat your mother like a god. Treat your father like a god. Treat the bona fide guru like a god. Treat your guest like a god. Perform only those acts that are irreproachable, not any others. Hold in high esteem only those good practices you have observed in me, and not others. So this is the character of the bona fide spiritual master. Vedegai Jahara Charita. This is the example. All right, so surprisingly, as we mentioned yesterday, it's very surprising that from this point on, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has no more comments on this song. So I'm going to have to try to say something for another half hour or so, 20 minutes. But we have some very, the poetry is there, and the poetry itself speaks to us. Narottam Das Thakur's brilliance is quite obvious. What does he say? Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adhama Janarabandhu Lokanath Lokera Jivan Ha ha Prabhu Korodoya Dehomore Pada Chaya Ebe Jashak Hushok Tribhuvan. So the first thing is, we often hear of the spiritual master as being an ocean of mercy, isn't it? Ohe Vaishnava Thakura Doyara Shagara Edase Karuna Kori. Or as we have here, Guruna, Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu. Most people, raise your hand if you've ever seen the ocean. Anybody here is coming from a place where there's ocean? Yeah, maybe some Gujaratis or Bengalis or some other people, but many people have never seen the ocean. And it's kind of hard to explain to such people, to give them a sense of what an ocean is, if you think about it. Those who have seen the ocean, they certainly understand the depth of this comparison. An ocean of mercy. It's inconceivable mercy, infinite mercy, practically speaking. That you can't even see the other side of a large lake. Anybody here from Puri? Chilika Lake? You can't see the other side of it. So, what to speak of a vastly larger ocean? So, an ocean is not only vast in terms of its width. I mean, they say half this globe is covered by the Pacific Ocean alone. That's a lot of water. But it's also unfathomably deep, and I'm using my words carefully here. Fathom is a unit of measurement for water, depth of water. So the ocean is so deep, you can't conceive of it. And the ocean is similarly wide. The reason they say you cannot see the other side is because the curvature of the earth obscures the other side. So they say. Okay, so Krishna mentions also the symptom of this kind of depth and width in Bhagavad-Gita chapter 2, text 70. Anybody know it? Apuryamanam achalam pratishtham samudramapa praveshanti yadvat tadvat kama yah praveshanti sarve sashantimapnoti nakama kami. Krishna tells us, a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires which enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still. That person alone can attain peace, not the person who strives to satisfy such desires. If you have this kind of depth and breadth, you do not get disturbed. This is the idea. Now, we're talking about what kind of ocean? Shri Guru? Karuna Sindhu. Compassion. Karuna means compassion. Or another word is anukampa, right? We have kampa means to shake. Bhukampa. Anukampa means you shake when you see someone else's pain. So compassion, according to Merriam-Webster's English Dictionary, a sympathetic consciousness of another's distress, along with a desire to alleviate it. So you're aware that someone else is undergoing pain and you want to help. That's compassion. It's particularly sensitive to the emotional aspects of other people's pain, but sometimes also it can be a little more rational when it's based on concepts like interdependence or justice or fairness and so on. So it's a mysterious thing, compassion, but it's primarily an emotion, a feeling for some others. Now, an ocean of compassion is difficult to imagine even for those who are familiar with the ocean. Ocean of compassion, very hard. And just as the tremendous depth and vast breadth of the ocean have practical ramifications, what are they? You have this huge body of water. What are the ramifications of that? Anybody from South India? Far south? Maybe Kanyakumari district? No, but you know what happened in 2004, right? This is what the ocean can do. Sri Lanka. A tidal wave can just, the whole village taken out, gone. Power, very strong power there. So these are the ramifications of being so deep and so vast. What's another one? There are sometimes, according to modern scientists, there are these inconceivably large aquatic creatures in the deep ocean that we haven't even cataloged yet. We don't even know what's down there. But Bhagavatam is talking about like these timingila fish and other. What is a timingila fish? They swallow whales whole as if little snacks. I mean, horrifying creatures are there. This is some of the ramifications of being such a vast ocean. So the spiritual master being such an ocean of mercy has tremendous ramifications for us. No matter what your situation is, there is ample compassion for you. Love. Remember the definition of compassion we gave already. It's a feeling to alleviate your pain. And, an acute awareness of that pain also. That's empathy, which is an allied concept. I was talking with Vijay Prabhu, book distribution minister, this morning. And surprisingly, you wouldn't know it from his classes because he's always quoting Bhagavad-Gita, but he said he never learned this verse. Chapter 6, text 32, anybody know that one? Atmaupamyena sarvatra Samam pashyati yorjana. Sukham vayati va dukkham sa yogi paramomata. Krishna says, I consider that the best yogi is that person who has empathy. Empathy and compassion are very closely related. Hard to really activate your compassion or do anything productive with your compassion if you don't have an understanding of who the person is that you're trying to help. Because you may not solve the problem. You may make the problem worse even. That does happen frequently. All right, so the compassion of His divine grace, the bona fide spiritual master, is abundant because, why? It transparently represents the infinite mercy of whom? Krishna, yes, but who is the primary agent of the extension of Krishna's mercy? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but that's kind of still a little bit oblique. Srimati Radharani. Srimati Radharani. Because this is her place, I have to say this. And I like to say it also. So, Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur, he gave us a very nice verse in which he compares Srimati Radharani to a unique ocean of love for her devotees, and one which consists of highly concentrated compassion. Just like in this world we find highly concentrated selfishness, so in Srimati Radharani we find an ocean, my friends, of highly concentrated, it's not even diluted, it's highly condensed, Ghanibhuta compassion. This is Srimati Radharani, and she's an ocean of it. So what does he say? Vatsalya Sindhur, Atisandra Kripaika Sindhu. These two things. Vatsalya in this case means affection for her devotees. So, this is the great mercy of Srimati Radharani. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu manifests this compassion only because he has accepted her mood and her complexion. What's the verse? Anarpachachim chirat karunayavatirna kalau samarpayitamunnato jalarasam sabhakti shriyam hari purata sundara dhyutikadambitaha sada hriday khandare spurdavaha shichinandana. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna, is well known and established by Rupa Goswami in his literatures that, what is the time now? 6 baje, okay, tika. That Krishna is the most merciful of all the forms of Bhagavan, and of all the forms of Krishna. Krishna does have different forms. The most merciful form is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we are the recipients of his mercy, but it's not coming through him, it's coming through whom? Nityananda Prabhu. And Nityananda's foremost empowered representative in this modern day and age was His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. This whole international society for Krishna consciousness is just the manifestation of his burning compassion to relieve the pain and suffering of all of us whom he knows nothing about. Stranger, complete stranger. This is the kind of compassion that Krishna is capable of because he's an ocean of this kind of quality. Kalyana Gunarnava, as opposed to Sangsararnava. Krishna is the Kalyana Gunarnava, and of all those gunas, primary guna is his compassion, Karuna. So an ocean fills itself with downpour that's created by the rain clouds. And the rain clouds originate from which place? Where do rain clouds come from? How do clouds get full of water? From the ocean. So the ocean is distilling its own water into the form of rain clouds, sending those clouds all over the place, and then dumping the water back down again, including back into the ocean. In a similar way, Srimati Radharani's inconceivable love increases on itself when it is received from the spiritual master and then presented to others. You got this? Because those others, in turn, they reciprocate with and then share that same love ad infinitum. They just keep going on giving it to others. And there's always new people, there's a sucker born every minute, so new people are always coming into this world and filling it up, so there's always work for us to do. But this is how we act as the extensions of the mercy of Srimati Radharani, conduits, if you will, for the current of her love. And this is especially the function of a bona fide spiritual master. And we've all been touched by that potency, great potency of that kind of compassion. This is why Srila Prabhupada said that our preaching of Krishna consciousness, especially by widely distributing his transcendental books, is not essentially different than what we have heard from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Gurvashtakam text number 6. What is that verse? Nikunja yuno ratikeri sitye ya libhir yuktirapekshaniya tatrati dakshyarati vallabhasya vande guroho Sri Charanarvindam. One day, Rameshwar, who is amazingly intelligent, he came to Srila Prabhupada and he expressed his doubt. He said, I was thinking about this verse, and it seems to me that when we go out and distribute books, we're not really doing anything different than what these gopis are doing when they go to bring some new gopi to Krishna, right? Is this correct, Srila Prabhupada? Srila Prabhupada says, yes, you understood. This is the fact. So, just as a rain cloud that's coming from the ocean increases the ocean with its downpour, so in the same way, all this compassion that only comes from one source, which is Lord Krishna, it increases upon itself when the devotees take part. That's why he says, Samsara davana lalihaloka tranaya karunya kanakanatvam karunya. Being compassionate upon those who are just being burnt to death in this material world. It's compared to an ocean in which you can drown. It's also compared to a forest fire in which you can be singed to death. Either way, fire or ice, as Robert Frost wrote. To die by either one will suffice. But Srila Prabhupada and those like him, especially Srila Prabhupada, any bona fide spiritual master, he feels that pain. And he acts as one of these rain clouds and distributes the mercy of the Lord to all the fallen conditioned souls out of his own causeless mercy. So we have to do likewise. We have to do just like that. So now finally, a few moments we have left. Adhama Janara Bandhu. Again, I'm just improvising now because Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur hasn't really commented here. But what does it mean, Adham Janara Bandhu? Adhama Jan. Who is Adham Jan? Me. People like me. But he's the only friend of the abominable persons, people who had no hope in life. And one example that came to my mind is a devotee, his godbrother of mine. He eventually became a devotee, but in Paris in the 1970s, the devotees, somebody knocked at the door of the temple. I think Indraduna Swami answered the door to the temple because he was in Paris in those days. And he saw that there was this young boy who was just completely, unshaven, unwashed, flies buzzing around him, all matted hair, filthy, hadn't bathed in maybe weeks, lice crawling through his hair. I mean, just a real mess. Grimy, filthy, torn clothes. And, the person was almost so subhuman that, when Maharaj asked him, what can we do for you? All he could do was grunt, food. Like an animal. Really like an animal. So he said, okay, I'll bring you something, but you can't come in. He wanted to come in. He wouldn't let him come in. No. He was just too filthy. He would smell up the whole place. Sometimes that happens in the West, actually. We experience Sunday feast. Some people come and just, creates a very ugly environment for all the other guests. What to do? So he gave him prasadam, he sent him outside. Then later on, he was walking around Japa Walk, And he saw that there was a place like, one of these islands that you have in the middle of the road with some shrubbery is there or something. So this person had carved out a little like, bower for himself in this, the island in the middle of the road. And he was living like an animal there. He had some newspapers there, and that was his bed, and just, this was his animalistic existence. And he thought, wow, so that he took compassion on that person. He let him come to the temple, but they gave him his prasadam and sent him away. Devotees used to call him Pigpen because he smelled like a pig pen. But then once Prabhupada came, and the devotees were walking, and they happened to be walking, and then in that neighborhood, they came by that place that Maharaj had by this time forgot about. And just out of the bushes, this boy lunged at Srila Prabhupada, and everybody just was astonished, and they all tried to stop him, but the boy was trying to grab Prabhupada's feet. And somehow the devotees pushed him away and they said, we'll give you prasadam later, but don't do this. This is not good. So anyway, they continued the walk. By the time they got back to the temple, Maharaj said he was noticing because attentive manager, right? When I left, the door was closed. When we came back, the door was wide open. So he had some suspicion. When they entered the room alongside Srila Prabhupada, the temple room was empty because virtually every devotee in the entire temple had gone out on the walk with Prabhupada, naturally. Only people who were left in the temple were the pujaris, who had to do their duty. But when they came back into the temple, the only person they saw in the middle of the temple room was this filthy person, Pigpen, 19-year-old boy, homeless, bum. And oh my God, now Prabhupada is going to see this person. And when Prabhupada walked over to see the deities, again, this person lunged at Prabhupada's feet and grabbed onto them, and the devotees were trying to pull him away, and Prabhupada said no. And the person was still standing there, and he was crying, kneeling at Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet, and Prabhupada was patting him on the head. He said, don't worry, everything's okay. It will be all right. Chant Hare Krishna. Everything's all right. Okay. Just for maybe 20 seconds he's doing this. The boy's holding on to Prabhupada's feet for 20 seconds, and Prabhupada is patting his filthy head with his own lotus hand and reassuring him. That is what it means, Sri Guru Karuna Sindhu. I mean, would any of us do that? I don't know. You have to answer that for yourself. But after Prabhupada's visit, and after that experience, the boy didn't want to leave the temple, so the devotees thought, well, maybe we can engage him in trying to clean up. They sent him upstairs to take a shower. Somebody maybe shaved him, and they tried to put him in a dhoti or something. And somehow or other he was doing some service, that he's not a complete loss, and he's getting some advancement at least. Then they decided to go out on Sankirtana, and this boy wanted to go on Sankirtan. When they went out to the van to load up with the books, he was sitting in the front passenger seat, this boy. And oh my God, what is he going to do now? He can't go on Sankirtan with it. How are you going to explain this kid? But he was adamant. He said, no, Prabhupada saved me. I want to go. So he did. He went out with a full bag of books. When he came back, his book bag was empty. And somebody thought, well, maybe he just threw the books away or something. He couldn't possibly have. But another person said, no, we saw he was distributing. He distributed all of them. The Maharaj asked him, how did you distribute these books? He said, I just told people, Prabhupada saved me. And somehow or other from that point on, he remained as a devotee. Eventually he got initiated. I said his name was Rasada. And became a big book distributor. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but Adhama Janara Bandhu. Sri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adhama Janara Bandhu. So this is the example. Lokanath Swami. Lokanath Lokera Jivan. Lokanath Goswami was Narottam Das Thakur's spiritual master. For us, we can say, Prabhupada Lokera Jivan. Some people, sometimes they sing like that. Prabhupada is the very life of all the devotees. So, Haha Prabhu Korodoya Dehomari Pada Chaya. Please give me the shade of your lotus feet. my dear Lord, please, please be merciful. The shade is like millions of moons because the spiritual master is the agent of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, most merciful personality of Godhead. And then finally, Ebe Jash Kushok Tribhuvan, one should glorify Prabhupada worldwide. Prabhupada never glorified himself, you may have noticed. It didn't become a guru cult like so many other so-called spiritual movements where the guru is the center of everything. Prabhupada always made Krishna the center and he just receded in the background. But Prabhupada did always give all credit to his spiritual master for all of his nearly miraculous achievements in spreading Krishna consciousness and traditional Vaishnava dharma all over the world. And so it falls upon us to declare his fame across all the three worlds, or at least on this one. To our last dying breath, we have to follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions and we have to try to glorify his divine grace to the best of our capacity. The world should recognize Srila Prabhupada and rejoice in his incredible character, his total surrender, his unprecedented achievements, his pure love for Krishna. And anyone who purely represents the same things that they have received from Srila Prabhupada, because of that, that person also deserves glorification, especially one's own spiritual master. There are a number of quotes that I have researched, and just to see how Srila Prabhupada is quoting various lines from this song. There's actually so many, at least 24 of them I have here. We don't have time to study them all. We have just a few minutes left. Maybe right now, what we should do is ask if anybody has any questions or comments, because then we can discuss. Yesterday, the questions went on a little bit. Anybody? Yes. क्या? जोर से बोलिए. Between spiritual master and beneficial spiritual master. I'm not sure I understand the question, but as far as I know the answer, there's no difference. Difference between spiritual master and beneficial spiritual master. I don't know. They're one and the same, no? Because bona fide spiritual master means he's only going to benefit you, right? No other possibility. He's not going to take advantage of you for sure. He's not going to hurt you. So, anything else? No? Okay, well, in that case, Drishaduna was reading this verse before Srila Prabhupada, Sri Guru Chanana Padma. Actually, Prabhupada asked him. He was talking about power of attorney. We should understand this. Prabhupada said, what is that verse? Sri Guru Chanana Padma, Kevala Bhakti Sadma Bandhomoi Sabhadanamate. And Prabhupada said, this is the beginning. If you want to be a devotee, then you must approach the spiritual master who's got the power. Sri Guru Charana Padma Keval Bhakti Sadma. Bandhomoi Sabhadanamate. Sabhadana means very carefully, not whimsically. That was in, I think, July 1976 in New York City. This is about a week after I saw Prabhupada, which is what I discussed last night. Back in 74, July 24th, New York City, Srimad Bhagavatam class, Prabhupada said there that you can't become Bhagavad Bhakta independently without caring for your spiritual master. That's nonsense, rascaldom. You'll never be able. We're singing daily, Yasya Prasadat Bhagavat Prasado. but you don't know the meaning, unfortunately. Yasya prasadat. If the spiritual master is pleased, then Bhagavan is pleased, not that independently. So first offense in the 10 offenses, he says, is guru avagnya, disobeying the orders, especially the Guru's orders. Guru's business is to preach Krishna conscious. If a person blasphemes a person like that who's preaching all over the world, then he's the greatest offense. So, then he asks, what is that song? Read it. And the devotee read, Sri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma. Prabhupada said, Bandhumi Savadana. And Prabhupada says, Savadana Mate, with great care. You sing this song, but do you know the meaning? No. Who can explain the meaning? Yes, you explain. And another devotee said, Sri Guru Charana Padma means the lotus feet of the Guru. Kevala Bhakti Sadma, that he is a reservoir of all devotion, or bhakti. Bandhumi Savadana means that we worship him with great awe. And Prabhupada said, yes, continue. Jahara Prasade Bhai. Prabhupada said, yes, then, E Bhava Toriya Jai. Prabhupada comments, E Bhava Toriya Jai. If one is, I mean to say, favored by Guru, then the path to cross over this nations is clear. Jahara Prasade Bhai, E Bhava Toriya Jai. Next line. Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoite. Prabhupada said, by the favor of Guru one gets Krishna. That is the Yasya Prasadat Bhagavat Prasada everywhere. This is Bhagavad Bhakti-yoga. So one who has not attained this state, then what is this Bhagavad Bhakti? Rascaldom. July 13th, 1975, in Philadelphia, Srila Prabhupada is giving a class on the 6th canto, and Prabhupada is talking about Damodar Lila. Mother, Krishna thought, Mother, nobody can bind me, and because I accepted to become your child, you're trying to bind me. Okay, you bring all your robes. You'll never be able to bind me. This is Krishna. But Mother Yashoda is the greatest devotee. So when Krishna saw that my mother is now exhausted, perspiring, all right, you can bind me. This is you've seen in the Krishna book, so yeyatha mam prapadyante tadheva bhajavyaham. If you want to play tricks with Krishna, Krishna is the greater trick. You'll never be able to. That is our mistake. We think I'm so intelligent, I can do something without knowledge of Krishna. That is our foolishness. Krishna says, Sarvasityaham hridasannavishta. I'm sitting in everyone's heart. How you can cheat him? It's not possible. Don't try to cheat Krishna. Don't try to cheat Guru. Don't try to cheat Krishna. Then your progress is sure. Guru Krishna Kripai Bhai Bhakti Lata Bij. You're singing daily, Sri Guru Charana Padma. What is that? Devotees all recite. And Prabhupada said, Guru Mukha Padma Bhakya Chiteti Koryaikya. Don't try to cheat the Guru, then progress will be checked. And he quotes the same verse. Remember I told you? All the acharyas commenting on these principles, they all say the same thing. And here Prabhupada then quotes Canto 11, Chapter 17, Text 27, which we've already explained. Acharyam mam vijaniyan navamanyeta karhachit ityadi. So Prabhupada says, Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoite. What is that? Avidya vinasha jate, Krishna prapti hoy. So these are the things. Avidya means ignorance. We're full of ignorance. Guru's duty is to open the eyes, and by opening your eyes, he will give you Krishna. This is the process. So you should be very much careful not to cheat Krishna, not to cheat Guru. Just become very sincere and follow. Then it is guaranteed. Cannot jump over Krishna neglecting Guru. Then it is finished. Krishna is not so easy. These things should be very carefully observed. Then Krishna will protect. And your progress in Krishna consciousness, you'll go back to home, back to Godhead. Assured, insured. In February of 28th, 1975 in Atlanta, Prabhupada was talking about his favorite scientist, Sarup Damodar Prabhu. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Let's skip ahead to May 30th, 1976, Honolulu. This is another room conversation. Prabhupada is talking about this principle, Guru, Yasya Prasadad Bhagavat Prasada Vidyadi. He said, do you understand? Can you explain? Prabhupada said, yes, first of all, one has to become very dear to Krishna, then automatically he becomes Guru. And when he becomes very dear to Krishna, then he becomes Guru. And by the mercy of such Guru, Krishna becomes merciful. These are the statements of Shastra. Arana kori homani asha. Arana kori homani asha. Simply, whatever you hear from Guru, you try to execute it. Arana kori homani asha. Do not expect anything more. So whatever we're chanting, whatever we're reading, we must realize that. Gaudiya Math institution became a failure on account of disobedience and not following the orders. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's statement about the verse, Vyavasayatmaka buddhir. We've discussed all these things. Here Prabhupada is quoting it himself. Find out this verse from Bhagavad-Gita. And then Chaitanya Charitamrita statement, Amara. One can become Guru by the superior order. So Prabhupada said on July 8th, 1976 in Washington, D.C., that Sanatana Goswami, he's completely surrendering. He said, I'm blank. I don't actually know how to inquire. You so kindly you speak everything. What is the subject matter of inquiry and what is the answer of such inquiry? I'm a completely blank slate. I'm simply submitting to you. Sadhya, the goal of life, and sadhana, the process by which one can approach it. I don't know anything about it. Simply I'm depending on your mercy. This is kripakori. This is surrender. In this way, we can make advancement in our spiritual education, and we must carry out the order of the spiritual master. Just like you are singing daily, Guru Mukha Padma Bhakka Chitete Kori Aikya, Aruna Kori Hamani Asha. Do not think otherwise. First of all, select who will be your spiritual master. You must know the preliminary law. Just like if you want to purchase gold, we discussed yesterday. At least you must know where gold is available. If you want to purchase diamond, you must know. If you're so foolish that you go to a butcher shop and ask him to supply diamond or gold, then you'll be cheated. You must know at least where to go and purchase gold or diamond. These are valuable things, so that requires little intelligence and sincerity. If we are sincere, this is a crude example, but the spiritual inquiry, if one is actually serious about understanding the goal of life, spiritual knowledge, then Krishna is situated in everyone's heart. He understands how this person is sincerely seeking. Then he'll give direction. You do this. He's giving direction in every respect. And again, Prabhupada quotes this also in his 4th canto, 29th chapter, 68th verse purport. The mind is the platform onto which all desires come and go. Srila Narottam Das Thakur therefore sings, Guru Mukha Padma Bhakka Chitete Kori Aikya Aruna Kori Homani Asha. Narottam Das Thakur advises everyone to stick to the principle of carrying out the orders of the spiritual master. One should not desire anything else. If the regular principles ordered by the spiritual master are followed rigidly, the mind will gradually be trained to desire nothing but the service of Krishna. Such training is the perfection of life. Okay, I think our time is up now. No more questions or any comments? Nothing? Last chance. Okay, so then we'll stop here. It's already 6:30. Thank you all very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Narottam Das Thakur. All glories to all the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,